welcome to our video about paper waste. We are Lea, Valentin, Tim and Jule from the Johann-Gottfried-Herder-Gymnasium in Berlin, and we'd like to present our calculations and alternatives in order to reduce CO2 emissions by printing paper. Let's start off with the question, what even is our goal in this project? How about you answer, Tim?
Sure. Our goal to this project is to have less paper wasted and to find alternatives that spend less CO2 being produced and used in the long run than paper.
Thanks, Tim. The reason why we chose this topic is because we were interested in how much paper is used and or wasted, not only in our school, but also all the ones in Germany. We wanted to find out how much money is spent for buying and printing out paper. What will we measure? We asked 3 of our teachers how much paper they use for each of their classes and how much that is per year. Those teachers are Mrs. Thiemich, Mrs. Philipp and Mr. Beutler. They all gave us an outlook on their classes and paper usage, which Jule and Tim will talk about now.
Starting off with Ms. Thiemich, our class teacher, who has 23 lessons per week with 114 students. All of these students consume about 296 sheets of paper per week. We took this number and multiplied it with the 36 weeks of school we have in the year. With this calculation, we came to the solution that about 10,656 papers per year are used in Mrs. Thiemich's lessons. 1 sheet of paper is about 5 grams of CO2. If we multiply the 5 grams with the 10,656, we come to the result of 53.28 kilograms of CO2 being used in the school year. Continuing with Mr. Beutler, who has 4 classes and uses about 100 sheets of paper per week. We used the same calculation as with Mrs. Thiemich, which means we multiplied the 100 paper sheets per week with the 36 weeks of a school year, which gets us to the result of 3,600 papers in one school year. If we calculate this number times the 5 grams of CO2, that makes 18 kilograms of CO2.
Lastly, we have Mrs. Philipp, our arts teacher. She has 2 classes and 64 students in total, in which she uses 70 sheets of paper per week. With the same calculation as before, we use these 70 sheets of paper per week and multiply it with the 36 weeks of school and get to a result of 2,520 sheets of paper in a school year. Multiplying this number with a 5 gram of CO2, that gets us to 12.6 kilograms of CO2. So after we added up these 3 numbers, we found out that it's 83.88 kilograms of CO2 for these 3 of our teachers. We also wanted to find out how much CO2 it is if we were to check for all schools all over Germany. So, Germany has 32,000 schools and roughly 11 million students, and if we divide these numbers, that means that there's about 340 students per school. Every student uses about 300 papers, which makes 102,000 papers per year. Now we multiply this number with the 32,000 schools in Germany, and we come to the result of 3,264,000,000 sheets of paper in a year on all schools in Germany. Calculating this with the 5 grams of CO2, we get to the shocking number of 22,400 tons of CO2 emissions just for paper.
Before we share our results, I want to talk about the environmental, social and cultural benefits of iPads and recycling paper, starting with the benefits of iPads. Cultural benefits. They promote the access to knowledge. That means digital platforms allow instant access to resources. The tools and apps on iPads allow creative expressions to grow, which traditional paper can't offer. Social benefits. iPads create an equal access to resources and materials. Also, iPads enhance social interaction through real-time collaboration tools. Environmental benefits. Manufacturing and transportation contribute significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. Devices can be refurbished or reused, reducing more waste. Moving on to the benefits of recycling paper. Cultural benefit. Recycling paper promotes a cultural shift towards valuing and practicing responsible consumption. Social benefit. Recycling paper lowers the cost and can save money for factories and consumers. Also, it can create new jobs in industries to provide employment opportunities in collection, processing and reusing materials.
Finishing with our results. We found out that using iPads instead of paper would lead to way higher greenhouse gas emissions than paper. If we were to get iPads for each student of Mrs. Thiemich, we would only have to use them approximately 197 years to equal the CO2 emissions. We took the amount of CO2 emissions for 144 iPads, which is 10,488 kilograms of CO2, and divided this number by the 53.28 kilograms of CO2 emissions for using paper for a whole year. Obviously, waiting almost 200 years to equal out the amount of CO2 emissions is not a good alternative, which means that using iPads instead of paper wouldn't work out. The alternative that did work out was the recycling paper. Like we already said, there's about 340 students in each school who all use about 102,000 papers per year. Calculating this number with 0.6 kilograms of CO2, we get to a total of 275.4 kilograms of CO2. Multiplying that with the 32,000 schools, that makes 8,800 tons of CO2, which means that you save 13,000 tons of CO2 just by using recycled paper. These calculations show that recycled paper is a way better alternative than iPads and reduces CO2.